My name is
Wait,
David Courtney.
what's that mean?
Tilt it up a bit, maybe. Is that up or down? Hello, my name is David Courtney, and I want to talk about art. Part of the reason art is so skewered is because of the prescriptive way we tend to look at it. There's been a documentary on TV called Made You Look about a major New York gallery that had sold fake Pollocks and Rothkos and made themselves $88 million, and yet there's a sequence, well, when Rothko's son comes on to testify about whether these are fakes or not, he says how beautiful the fake is, and yet it's a fake. And the Pollock had yellow paint in, a Pollock never used, and so on and so forth. But there's where the problem comes, because at one point they set this, because this painting was supposedly done in the 1960s, they put it up side by side with a real Pollock. And the fake has more dynamic drama in it than the Pollock. So this is how things become skewered, because these art critics line up on each side of the line drawn in the sand as to whether it's a fake or real. And of course what gets lost in it is the impact of what's painting trying to do. And I think then we have to look at our neurology, that we have this frontal cortex, and it designs, the lenses through which we capacitate ourselves to actually look at art and think about art and whatnot. And that is something that becomes inside us, looking out. So the frontal cortex frames everything up, attaches value to, a master's signature, makes it worth zillions of dollars, and if it's a fake, it's worth nothing. So that's the thing that we're up against in art, and I'm going to show you my paintings and present what I think is an art revolution geared to neurology, the thinking outside the box. Because that box happens because we fire and wire our brain on a daily basis. We fire and wire 24/7. The brain never stops, and it never stops trying to value things and place us in context so that we can protect our identity and salvage something of a continuum day to day, particularly in this world where information is blitzing us. It's happening so fast that it supplants where we were yesterday, so that we never really get our feet on the ground, we never get anchored in terms of who we are or what consciousness is about, and what is painting supposed to do. Painting, to me, well, let's say dance or writing, poetry, or any of the expressive arts. These help you flow, help you tap in to the body electric, and that's what you want. And that's why psychedelics, that I'll talk about later on, are likewise important, because you have this neurological map, this box that we keep thinking inside, and we keep layering it because axons and dendrites in our brain get coated with this myelin, so it insulates us from change, and we become stratified, tabled, so that each era of ourself becomes a bigger block in deciphering who we are, and that sacrifices a lot in terms of, we can't cleanse the doors of perception, the windows of perception, because we're fixed, we're anchored in a way of doing things, and then you've got all this information bombardment stuff going on that we're being massaged and manipulated and influenced and ad infinitum. And art is one of those places that we can access the interior of ourselves, our imagination. Spinoza said he thought the imagination was pure evil. And this is how things came down. You've got people believing imagination's evil, that objectivity is, and scientific vantage points are everything, objectivity. Descartes, the whole, body divided thing, and who we are and what we are, from Francis Bacon, the scientist, not the painter, on. The scientific method has precisely developed because of these correlations of precision, of quantifying things and making them add up essentially in our minds, but really it's in our left brain. Ian McGilchrist, in the Master and the Emissary book, shows that because we've learned to emphasize and lean on the left brain, we have made our brains totally lopsided. And what we consider creativity from a left brain point of view is really just a trajectory barely out of the prescriptiveness and inside the box thinking that we are, and then we're insulated from change, and every day the sediment builds up and layers build up and changing one's viewpoint. But art should, if you talk about Picasso and his investigation of bipolarity, or Salvador Dali and the subconscious, or Rene Magritte and the brain opening up, looking inside the brain, looking out, looking inside, and that whole realm of consciousness, which is truly important for artists. My art is dissociative art, so just like ketamine, my art is trying to blow up into smithereens this old prescriptiveness is inside the box. And the only way you can do that is by coming with something original, something new, something that, comes up. This whole idea of what is effective art should first and foremost cater to this idea of what's going on within us neurologically, so that looking at a piece of art, we can migrate our firing and wiring into an imaginative zone. Not necessarily positive or negative, but just it's that enticement to explore one step further, to go a little deeper, to be more expansive, to be more cosmological, and to take us away from that sort of nose to the grindstone approach. So neurologically, we become a pattern. I remember being in Paris in 2019, staying at Saint Germain Hotel, walking down to the Seine. There was a gallery. Pascal Dumbas had some painting in the window. I went in, opened up a book of his, and it said, "Reality is a pattern." And that's the problem, because we become inundated with certain frequencies, and we don't even recognize that, because after all, we're inside the cave looking at all the projections. And unless we expand the cave and get out of the cave, then we've got this problem with an endless realm of regurgitated and predigested prescriptiveness that really inclines the art world. Well, that's why every local art group upholds the idea of landscape. You can tell a good painter from a bad painter by how his clouds look, how the mountains look, how the grass looks, the trees look, and then of course they give it a little jiggle so that the colors are more voluptuous or whatever. After all, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We're standing on what Vincent van Gogh did with color, and others in terms of breaking up our previous understandings of what painting was all about and what we can actually access in terms of our interior, in terms of our imaginative quest into forming opinions on a constant basis, because that's what you have to do. You have to shadow box, and you're dancing with the shadows, and you're getting, there's never anything particularly definitive, and it's really hard to keep up or get a body of work that is expansive. There are Dadaists who had a lot of works, or there's even the Scream. Like a lot of artists, singers, we might say Sheryl Crow, Jewel, there's songs that they had that commanded the airways, but in terms of a larger body of work, well, maybe I'm unfamiliar with some of it, but the point is that breaking through to the other side, as Jim Morrison sang about, is an experience of consciousness. And then to go to the right brain, oh, I got a little skewered myself. In McGilchrist, The Master and the Emissary, pointing out what the left brain does. Tons of research in that book. I think it took him 20 years to write it. And we've lopsided ourselves in the left brain. So that, well, what is left brain? It's mathematics, it's numerical. It's things like, well, in 1984, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Of course, what they're saying in 1984 is that the government can say 2 plus 2 equals 5, and we have to agree, we have to deny our own senses, our own perception, and fit into the alignment of governmental prescriptiveness. And that's why art is so important, to keep leveraging, to keep, jumping out of that box, to sustain some level of animation in our own pursuit of imaging. And for me, my paintings, they have to be interesting, they have to be different, they have to, if they engage and you look at them for a while, you're going to start asking questions. Some you can turn upside down. That's the old perennial thing. That was a joke about the Roscoe thing when it was in the courtroom. Was it upside down or was it right side up? And really both visions are important. And some of mine, I would never say that this is the only way to look at it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't more sophisticated, more intellectual, more elaborate, and simply better understandings of art. Cat in the Hat is a book that you read. It's made of words. The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot is likewise. One's going to take you on a sort of joyful, kid-like journey. The other is going to pursue the heart and soul of existential questions about who we are and what we are and what we're going through and how we're assembling ourselves given all that. And so when we get to the point of where my art is happening, it's dissociative art, is trying to break off the shackles, the straitjacket of prescriptiveness, and invite you to come somewhere that's very different from that. Now, I have written several books, most recently City Without Gravity, and before that Brain Plasticity and Mind Manifesting Psychedelics. I call that the Brain Plasticity Bible. There are certain ways that you have to negotiate with plasticity and institute certain things if you're going to actually change your brain. Psychedelics, they drive a bus into the bus shelter. They're a torpedo coming onto a ship. They're like an icebreaker coming into your neurological map, and they break it up, and immediately you're grappling with a new side of yourself, and it's very confusing. And that's where change can happen, because all these layering of myelin-coated realities that have become institutionalized and systemic within the maintenance of your own selfhood. So to get beyond that and to continue to get beyond that means developing an interior landscape, which really should involve all the arts. You should be listening to music, writing poetry, painting. Everybody's got an artist inside him. And that's the important thing about art. Not that there are Van Goghs that sell for $98 million. That's not what's key to art. What's key to art is the key that unlocks the door and throws open a new universe of understanding. And that you have to keep cultivating, because thresholds, like I say, the dust will settle. Plasticity comes from the Greek word plastika, meaning to pour into a form. And essentially, we grow up as children and adults in schools, in churches, and the justice system, the whole thing pours ideas into our head that formulates a landscape that is completely aligned and sustained by these sociological pressures. And right now we're going through a universal global identity crises as everything seems to be moving so fast technologically, and with climate change today, with thousands of people evacuating Greece because of forest fires. In Canada, plumes of smoke going down to the States, and in Nova Scotia today, floods covering cars in the streets. And then you've got the Ukraine, you've got Lebanon and Syria and the Sudan, and an infinite number of crises where human beings are being exposed to bloodshed and cruelty, devastation and horror. And if ever we needed some sort of remedy, we need it now. And to break up the neurological location of our own prejudice and of our own lack of divergence. Divergence isn't good just for the sake of divergence. There's some things that are going to be more meaningful than others. And that's ultimately the criteria that distinguishes between Cat in the Hat and the Wasteland, or between more Mickey Mouse ideas and other ideas. So building on the Ian McGilchrist idea about the left brain, Simon Baron-Cohen, world expert on autism, Sir Simon Baron-Cohen, writes about the evil, the science of evil. And he talks about how if your parents are both math professors, the chance of you being autistic are so much higher. And that sort of autistic, Asperger's, male, extreme syndrome, he lumps those together at that end of what I call the Courtney spectrum. That's the autism end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, Eric Kendall talks about in The Age of Insight. He talks about art, he talks about metaphor, and all these different ways of thinking, of visualizing in the imagination, allegory, and paintings that involve sequences within the consciousness that are outside this 1, 2, 3 realm. And so I just want to finalize that idea that we have this box, neurological map. We fire and wire it because as children we grow up, we assemble ourselves with this information. And this information becomes tabled in our brain, and it becomes very hard to unpack. You got to take this jackhammer down and really chisel away at these statuesque feelings and ideation that we have put together as a self. And art's trying to lead us out of that continuously. And yet, as I say, the local art groups and the theme of art generally is misunderstood, and that if you can paint a portrait that looks like, 1861, photography was discovered, and pictures, up till then, and even then it took a long time before you could transfer them to magazines. So in the 20s and 30s, what you're still dealing with is